Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our interview. We are covering Mastering the Interview today. I am Jessica Touchard and I'm the Senior Recruiter here at GeoSearch. And we welcome everyone here. Just for some housekeeping items, we are going to mute everyone's mics. So you will not be able to speak with us, but any questions you have, we welcome you to put that into the Q&A box. And we will be answering those throughout the webinar. If they are really relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, we'll shout those out. If not, we'll wait till the end and we'll address those questions then. All of you will get an email with the link to this webinar for attending, and also if you're registering. So if you have to leave early for any reason, you will be emailed that. And also you will have a takeaway that you can download at the very end that has interviewing resources for you. I'm joined by Richard Serby. He's the president of GeoSearch, and also Laura Thorne. She is a career coach within the environmental sector. Her company name is The Career Coach, or the Environmental Career Coach, excuse me. And so welcome today. The first thing we're going to do, I'm going to launch a quick poll because we kind of wanted to find out who is attending, whether they're on the employer side, the interviewer side, or the job seeker. So that is the first thing we're going to do. If you could describe your interest today, that would be helpful for us. And so far as people are entering this information, it looks like most of you are job seekers, but we do have about a quarter of you today that are hiring managers. So we'll be talking a lot about how to get comfortable with that side of the table, as well as comfortable with as being a job seeker. If the people who are here as hiring managers, I will close this poll in just a couple seconds. The next one we're going to do will be talking about how comfortable you are as an interviewer, if you've been doing it for quite a long time, or kind of what your comfort level is as you're hiring people. I think this should close out in just a moment. Maybe, okay. And then the next one that we'll do is how comfortable are you as an interviewer? Sorry, technical difficulties here. So some of you have been interviewing for quite some time. Others may have just started or just come in a management role, and it can be just as intimidating to be the interviewer as it is the interviewee. So it looks like most of you are somewhat comfortable. A couple of you said very uncomfortable. So we'll definitely address some of those issues and how that can be more comfortable as we go on. And then the last one I'm going to do for job seekers, just how comfortable are you in an interview? How comfortable are you attending interviews, what to wear, you know, the kind of the basics, or how new are you to that? And it looks like as things are coming in here, most of you, again, somewhat comfortable. That's good, because we're going to be talking, probably a lot of what we're saying are going to be some of the new things that are entering our space in terms of interview techniques that employers are engaging to either save time or to challenge some of our technical skills. And then some of you are just somewhat uncomfortable. So that's great. You're in the right place. As you know, we are recruiters within the GIS, GPS, photogrammetry, remote sensing, environmental sectors, and we work with these employers all of the time. We hear questions from job seekers all of the time about interviewing, and also try to answer any questions we can for our clients, our employers, who are telling us to what their challenges have been interviewing people. So, Rich, do you want to start in terms of getting us kicked off here?
Sure. I'd like to speak to that 20% of those out there that are responsible for interviewing, and perhaps some of these suggestions could be perhaps make you more comfortable in that role. Most of us are not trained to conduct employment interviews when we are in college, or even when we accept our first position and get into a position in which we are going to be interviewing people for employment. But I think a few things here can perhaps make it more comfortable. The setting of the interview is something that should be considered. If you are interviewing somebody for a sales position, a business development, or a management position, a supervisory position, then a setting around a conference table, maybe with several people participating in that interview, is very much appropriate. The salesperson certainly, and the management folks will oftentimes be seated around a conference table with clients and with staff and so forth. So that's a very appropriate setting. For someone who's going to be working in a workstation in a technical role, it is probably not going to be a big team of people doing the interview, at least not all at once. It's probably going to be one or two people who conduct the interview. And probably it's best to find a more comfortable place, such as a workstation that's available with 2 or 3 seats, so you can have that discussion with that person at a place that's going to be comfortable for them because they're used to that kind of a setting. Do your introductions, starting with some basics about the industry and your company or your public agency, and what makes your company or public agency stand out and be among the best of what you do. The tell me about yourself icebreaker is very common in doing the introductions to get people more comfortable in talking to one another. The questions that you ask, the open-ended questions, are typically best when you are interviewing people, allowing them an opportunity to say more about your question and talk about it a bit and turn that into somewhat of a discussion between you and the candidate. Versus technical. Technical positions oftentimes require a specific answer, a specific response. And so that would be the exception when you're talking to a person about a technical role. And then, of course, we get into questions that are legal and appropriate versus those questions that could end up in court if they're just outlandish. So looking at the kinds of questions that would be not appropriate would be those questions that have to do with the personal life of the person that you are interviewing. Marital status, children in school, those kinds of things are probably not appropriate in most instances, unless, of course, the candidate himself or herself just offers that information without being asked. And then invite questions. One of the things that I like to do is to say, perhaps I have not asked the question that you really want to answer. So ask yourself the question and tell me the answer. Let's make sure that we've covered everything that you would like to say. And then, of course, what would you like to know more about us or about the position for which you are applying? And Laura has some ideas as well about the increased use of electronic platforms in conducting interviews, whether that's Skype or some other kind of a video platform that is being utilized more and more often. Laura, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, thanks, Rich. As far as from the hiring perspective, a lot of companies, especially technical ones, are looking to incorporate technology where they can, and also be able to weed out their applicants by ensuring that they are able to use technology. So they're going towards using virtual sort of means, which are like live videos and Skype, to interview their candidates. And this really should be not a standalone thing. A lot of time it is the initial interview that you have. A lot of companies are also incorporating conference calls. So sometimes you might get a call from someone like Jessica, who is just screening you to see if you're going to make it past a phone call, and then they might decide if they're going to give you that virtual interview or face-to-face interview. And you really need to be just prepared for anything. And they all have very similar needs and preparation. If you're doing a video interview, you need to be aware of how you're dressed, how what your surroundings are like, how you sound and look technically. So you should definitely do a trial run. If you know you're going to be using Skype, you should be checking to see what your background looks like behind you. And you want to also prepare to answer those questions just like you would in person. So any parts of an interview, you are trying to stand out from the other people that are applying and be memorable and make it to that next call. And so a phone call interview is usually a screening to see if you'll make it to a live or video interview. A video interview is then screening to see if you're going to make it to so a virtual can be with a person, kind of like this, a two-way, or it can actually be just you and a recording system, and that's the really tough one. You still need to do all the preparation, maybe even more. You need to have a nice quiet space, no distractions, and a lot of them are timed, so that's adds a level of nerve-wracking. And have something in front of you to write notes. I don't think that there would be anything wrong or penalty if you are looking at your paper for a second. Try to be casual, try to act like you're talking to an actual person. Most of them have a practice, so I can hit record, see if I like what I said or how I looked, and then start over. And like I said, that's probably not going to be the final interview. Hopefully you make it to the next one, which would be in person. And at some point,
by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, people should type in the chat box if they have had experience with these new video interviews. We had one client using them just a little bit ago, and it was, I had phone calls from candidates just panicking. And, they couldn't get it set up, they couldn't get the camera wasn't on, or they thought it wasn't on, and if it was on, they weren't sure what it was viewing. It was kind of a crazy experience. So if anybody's had any of that, I think these are new platforms coming out. They're being marketed to a lot of companies, particularly technology companies, because it's a fast way to get the answers that they need, at least immediately. Here's these 3 questions, and we know these are knockout questions. If they can't answer those, then that's all we need. And right. So it allows for hiring managers to not have to interview everyone, really.
From an employer's point of view too, it's a cost-saving measure to have, especially the two-way video interview, where there is actually a chance for some back and forth between the candidate and the employer. Flying someone to a location is expensive. Putting them up into a hotel and all of that is an expensive proposition. So it's just one more step that an employer can take to, before they spend the money on airfare and lodging and food, let's make sure that we want to go to that expense. The video platform, I believe, can be somewhat of an advantage for someone who has an accent. And when you have an accent and you are restricted to a telephone interview only, it sometimes can get in your way. I have had candidates, very well qualified candidates, screened out of an interview process because the interviewer could not understand what they were saying. And it is the video platform gives them one more piece of information that they don't have on a telephone interview. So if you do have an accent, just make sure you try to speak slowly and clearly, and do the same thing if you happen to be in a video platform.
And if you feel like that has been an issue for you in the past, if you suspect that may have been part of maybe why you weren't invited in for a personal interview, you could try to request a video interview. Many companies have that set up all the time. It's just not their standard process, but absolutely request one if you feel like that could be an advantage for you. Sorry, Laura, I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent.
That's totally fine.
It doesn't look like we have too many people in, at least live here today, that have done a lot of video interviewing, but I know it's out there, especially like what you were talking about, the one-way interview process. And as an employer, for the employers here too, it's almost like what Rich was talking about in terms of setting. We need to be making sure we're using those types of tools for appropriate people. So maybe a field surveyor would not be the one to do a video interview, you know, like a standalone one. If it's an IT role or if it's a sales position or something like that, that seems to be more relevant there. So again, even those tools should be kind of compared against what you're looking for this person to do in the role in your company.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pros and cons, and depending on the type of your company, your capabilities with your own technology, and that they should be weighed. And then included, you know, the best strategy is to have a hiring strategy and to know why you're using it, and to be able to ensure that it is actually making better decisions for you and not actually hurting your process. Because like you said, if I'm using it incorrectly and I accidentally am knocking people off the list who would have been great candidates because of the technology I'm using, that's obviously a bad choice.
Right. Most thing to remember, I always say to job seekers too, they really want you to be the right one. I mean, you can go in there knowing they would love you to be the perfect fit. I mean, they don't want to interview for, you know, all of these people. What they're doing and why they're advertising and why they're bringing people to the table is they have a need within their company to fill. And you hopefully are it. So the best you can present yourself and your skills in any format allowed, that they allow you to, is beneficial to everyone.
Okay. Be sure to type in your questions, and we would like to respond to those as we move along. The kinds of issues that I see on the person being interviewed are very much the same kinds of things that I would suggest to a person conducting an interview. It is to everyone's advantage to make sure that the setting is appropriate, that the conversation, it is not an interrogation, it is a conversation. And as long as you are able to maintain that kind of an atmosphere, both the person conducting the interview and the person being interviewed become more comfortable and much more responsive and open to responding to questions. So the use of technology is relatively new for this purpose. I know I experimented with it it's been almost 20 years ago. I had to go to a public library and rent the room for a video conference. It was brand new, and it was awkward on both sides of the screen. So as we become more and more used to and comfortable with using technology in the interview process, I'm sure that some very smart folks out there will be able to develop ways in which this can become a more effective medium. Laura, why don't you talk a little bit about your business and what you do? That is, to me, it's very interesting. I think everybody would like to hear about that.
Well, thanks, Rich. And I also want to just thank you guys for having me here today. I really enjoy helping people make it to their next step, whatever that is, whether it's their business or their lives or their careers. I've always been a get out there and get it kind of person, whatever it takes, and I don't need other people to hold my hand, so I lend that to other people. I started in photography and design, and I decided, and then I did programming, and I actually worked in a global telemarketing company out of Dublin, and then I decided I'd rather work outdoors, so I got a degree in environmental science, and I did 10 years of project management and grants management for a local environmental agency in Tampa. There I moved up very quickly because I used my database skills to do things other environmental scientists weren't doing. And I moved into upper level management in just a couple of years. And that's when I started doing business training. And I've since taken that and started my own business consulting job. And then the last couple of years, I've been involved with an organization called the National Association of Environmental Professionals. And I was the president of the Tampa chapter last year. And that's the last few years when I was part of the elected board. I've been working with students a lot, and I've noticed a pattern that I followed myself, that we're not making the same mistakes, but we're following the same patterns and trends that lead us to the same disappointments. So that is graduating without a job, graduating without a network, graduating without having any idea what jobs are available. And so I started the Environmental Career Coach to help try to circumvent those and get students to be thinking proactively about what they're going to do when they do graduate, because the colleges, some of them are trying, but there's not a whole lot of effort. Their efforts are on successful graduation, and then the next step is up to them. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I know that with GIS and information technologies, there is crossover. And like I said, my abilities in programming and database totally helped me advance in my environmental career as well.
Right. So we do have a few questions coming in, and I think Amanda, she had a question about they must interview for some technical positions such as GIS analysts and technicians, and she was wondering how they approach that type of interview successfully. And Amanda, you can tell me too. I'm assuming you're kind of asking as an employer the way you worded the questions, but maybe if you're in an interview or two. I know a lot of technical roles often require testing. Have you seen that as well, Laura, in terms of technical tests?
Yes, a lot of the tests that they give, they can vary. I've seen logic tests. I've seen actual, what does this programming mean, and interpretation. And I think in some circumstances, they want you to be able to put the right answer, but in others, they're just looking to see what your thought process is. And if you're able to solve problems, can you work on your own? So they may give you the test and leave the room, but that doesn't mean they're not still watching you. They may give you a test and sit there and watch you. I think I'd probably rather have them leave. But the point is that if you don't know the answer, don't just sit there. Try to write something down. I was offered a job for a water monitoring program director at one point, and they had given me a test, and it was SAS programming language. And I had, like I said, done other programming, but I hadn't actually worked with SAS before. So I tried. I used what I already knew from other programming language, and I said, I think this means blah, blah, blah. And apparently that was enough to say at least I was teachable and that I was able to problem solve and work on my own, and they did offer me the job. So the point is that they may give you a test, but it could work in your favor if you use it wisely.
Right.
I have had clients also develop electronic tests that I could send to a prospective candidate by email. And my client would ask, before we schedule a telephone interview, I would like to see how well they do on this particular test. It shouldn't take a great deal of time to take the test, but it does give us some basic confidence that they understand the basics of the technologies that we utilize here and can demonstrate some level of proficiency. So that is another way in which I have used testing as a precursor to conducting a telephone interview.
Yeah. And one of the things, if you're an employer preparing for those types of technical interviews, it's obviously important that you, many of our clients that follow kind of a similar process where I may be the first person to screen a candidate that I submit to our customer, but then from there on, they either have their internal HR department or the actual hiring manager first do a telephone interview. Even sometimes when they're local to the job, they may do a telephone interview because it's shorter and more convenient for everyone to maybe get some of the technical questions out of the way. Maybe make sure, that they understand what the position is and if they still believe they're a good fit for that role. And then if that conversation goes well, they invite them in or invite them in for a personal interview or a video interview of some kind. One of the things that I've encountered before, it was actually for a non-geospatial role. It was a staff accountant position that we were recruiting for. And the company was kind of surprising them. I don't think they meant to, but when they got to the personal interview, they were giving them a technical test on Excel because that was something that, whatever the process was they were doing in that accounting role, they really needed to understand. And these people were not always doing so well on the technical portion. And then once we got involved in the interview process, and we just said, by the way, the next step will be a personal interview, and it will include an Excel test. That helped a lot. And I think it's the type of person we were talking about. Staff accountants are not necessarily known for their spontaneity, and that's not their role. Their role is not to think on the fly. Their role is to be calculated and methodical about their work. And so just allowing them to understand what's coming, I think also helps in technical positions that you're interviewing for, whether you're the job seeker or the employer. If you are invited in for a technical interview and you know that you're going to do much better if you're prepared, ask those questions to either the screener, to whoever you're talking with. Ask, what can I expect? How many people will be in the interview? Will there be a technical test? And a lot of times they will just answer those, and you can, and then you can feel better prepared. And then as an employer, just reminding yourself to tell them what's coming up next. That can make all the difference in their performance.
I think that kind of alludes to a couple of points. What kind of company are you and who are you looking to hire? A lot of companies that are high performing are choosing employees that are trainable rather than already know the material. So part of the test, and I think you have to decide that before you deliver the test and create the test, is what are you trying to do with it? Surprising people just to see what they can know on the fly is not going to really help you find the right candidate. You may scare the best person off because they weren't aware, or they're just not a good test taker. And does it really hurt to tell people ahead of time what's coming?
Right.
What are they going to do? Go online and learn how to use Google Excel or Google Sheets or Excel like right on the fly, and then they're going to come in and ace the test? Like that's not realistic either. So
right,
and
we didn't tell them anything that was going to be on the test, exactly, just to let them know it was going to be there. That's all that really matters usually. So it's just a matter of just being prepared and them not being taken off guard. What is your greatest success and what are your weaknesses? That question is often asked when I am the type of person that does not linger too long on my wins or losses. So what do you say when that question is asked to you? What are your strengths and weaknesses?
Well, in my experience and also my training, I guess, the strengths part of it probably is not as difficult. I think that most of us are pretty aware of the strengths that we bring to an employer and can speak to that probably pretty directly. The weaknesses is a little trickier. My example is, I think my weakness is that I just never want to go home. I just want to stay and work. So have a laugh about it. But if you have an area in which you would really like to improve, you could speak to a weakness. As a result of my not knowing C# programming language, I am enrolled in a class where I am learning how to program using C#. And that's probably one of the weaknesses that I recognized, and I took some action to correct it.
Right. Laura, do you have anything else to say on that?
No, I agree. Anytime you have that question, it's an opportunity for you to turn your so-called weakness into a strength and show them that you're able to recognize what that weakness is and then how you are proactively countering it, which shows them that you're able to do that same thing on the job when you encounter something that you're not skilled at.
And Anna asked this question, and she actually, kind of put a caveat in there that she's not the type of person that would linger on those things too long. When you're in the interview process, you probably want to have that prepared then. Just think of when it is a common question, I feel like, and it may not come in that exact form, but if you can have some success and maybe even some failure in your mind and how you resolved that problem, that's good. So if you're not somebody that can think of it on the fly, certainly have it prepared. Actually, I recommend everybody have it prepared.
I think it's in everyone's best interest to really know what your weaknesses are anyhow and be working against those. It's one of the things as a career coach that I do with people is identify we do a personal SWOT analysis, and which is the strengths, threats, opportunities, and weaknesses. And then we put things in the plan to counter those or leverage strengths.
Right. Okay. And then the next question is, and we get this one a lot actually from Tricia, and she says that she had a company go out of business during the recession, and since then her job history has been less than consistent or less consistent she would like to be. So she feels she gets judged on that, probably in your resume as well as possibly interviews. So how do you best approach that, Rich? Terms of presenting that in the light?
Yeah, I would just remind people that at the near the end of 2008, we fell off a cliff, and we have just now begun to recover from that drastic fall. That affected a lot of people. That affected people who were being laid off as a result of the Great Recession. It affected businesses who were struggling to stay afloat. Some didn't stay afloat. I can use recruitment and staffing as one example. 60% of staffing firms went under between 2009 and 2012. So we were in a very precarious situation that affected almost everyone in one way or another. So I think to simply explain and be truthful about what happened as a result of that experience and what you have done to try to get back on track again and reinvent your career is just, it's a topic that everyone who experienced those years understands completely. So I don't think that it's anything to be embarrassed about. And in this day and age, especially I think as a result of coming out of the recession, the fact that some people have had to change positions every 2 or 3 years, more often than they would like, was just a reality. It was a very tenuous period of time. We saw evidence because we're a pretty good barometer of what's coming next. We began to see things strengthen and get better starting in 2012. And as you probably know now, it is a rocket ship out there with regard to employment and unemployment rates. We have half of our states where unemployment rates are at 2% or 3%. That means that's full employment. 5% is a balance, but anything less than 5% is a buyer's market. That is, if you are applying for a job, you are going to be looked at very carefully because candidates are much more scarce now than they were a few years ago when we had an abundance of candidates. And a lack of positions available.
Right.
So just prepare it, be honest, have that discussion, and I think that you're going to be looked at carefully based on the fact that you have something to bring to the employer that no one else quite has.
Yeah, and I think too, if you find yourself getting cut off in the resume stage, just when you're applying, I think adding a cover letter with those explanations help to formulate, a really good conversation about those transitions that you had to make and why and therefore. So I think that's your best bet in terms of just being honest exactly. So. And then we had another question about portfolios and whether or not to prepare one, whether or not companies should ask for those in technical positions. Do either of you have comments on those?
I believe so. I believe that, and then Laura can speak to this as well, with regard to developing your own personal website, for instance. Some of them are no cost, and having links to work that you've done, providing an addendum to your resume, because the resume is going to be transferred electronically through email in most cases, and having an addendum to your resume that speaks to your work. Laura, what other ideas do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the technical realm, people are looking, like you said, even before you come in for an interview, to see what you're capable of doing. One thing that you need to have is your LinkedIn page. If you don't have one, you need one, and it needs to be complete and full and have as much detail as you can. And you want that on the top of your resume instead of your physical address. You want to have your LinkedIn address and use it as additional space. So your resume should be 2 pages around, and make sure that you use your LinkedIn page as the place to put some additional materials. You can put, especially in technical roles, there's a place in there to put projects. You can put all the people who worked on it. You can put published papers. You can put a lot of things in there. Get people to give you references to put on your LinkedIn. That's a give and take thing. So if you give someone a reference, it's courtesy to get one back. So go out there and start giving people references who've been your mentors and the people helping you, or previous boss who's supportive of you, the people on your reference list. And then as far as the portfolios go, if you have stuff to bring to the interview, that's awesome too, but it's hard to bring a technical or a GIS map or a story map that you made into an interview, but you can certainly have it on your LinkedIn, and certainly provide it if you create your own personal page. I had one of these years ago, and I had put a section for publications, flyers that I'd made, anything that showed I was capable of doing, even if it was not related maybe to the job, but it showed that I have done newsletters in the past and I have a little bit of design experience, and then publications and anything. Make it a collection, and you could even say GIS stuff, and just so it shows that you've done a body of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of social media, since we are talking about LinkedIn, what types of things, everyone's been warned about how nothing on your social media page goes away and that it's always going to be there. But what types of, while you're in the job seeking process, what types of cautions should you have? And as an employer looking at those sites, maybe vetting candidates, what kind of cautions should you have?
We know by way of one or two of our clients that they go to Facebook and they look you up, and they make some decisions. They make some decisions about that. I'm not so sure how ethical that is, but I do think it does tell us a cautionary tale about how you use in Facebook, for instance. That is, in my opinion, I use it for friends and family. And although the business does have a Facebook page, it's not how we typically communicate with our clients or our candidates. But be careful. Be careful what you're doing online. LinkedIn is set up in such a way that it really is business to business, professional to professional, and everybody knows that. They understand the ground rules on LinkedIn, not so much Facebook. So be careful what you do and how you represent yourself in any social media platform. It could have an impact on whether or not you get invited to an interview.
I think one thing though, you can use your Facebook is really a reflection of maybe who you are and what your personal life looks like. And if your personal life has a lot of parties, a lot of late nights, I can see now, again, this isn't something they're supposed to be judging you on, but that doesn't mean people aren't human, and they don't. But if I'm looking at two candidates and one of them has out all night partying and has this crazy lifestyle, and the other one is out volunteering and supporting causes and doing responsible things, I'm only naturally going to make a initial judgment about the two of them. So you can positively use your Facebook, and it's probably where everyone should be doing, is just posting positive things and the things that they're doing to make a difference. But that's not really what we all do.
Right, absolutely. And I think that some of the things that we're learning, it's in the news all the time now, but it's just a reality too, is there sometimes our feeds, if you followed a page 5 years ago and they either changed focus or or you liked something. I mean, anymore, it can be even that you've liked something in the past. Sometimes they automatically show up on your feed. And that's something that I've noticed with some of our job seekers who have come in with this concern, is things show up on my Facebook. I don't even know, I didn't even do it. And it wasn't a friend tagging them or anything. It was something about a company they've followed or a cause that they've followed that automatically posts. And so as an employer, for the employers listening, I think that also needs to be considered, especially if it's a political thing or something like, a cause of some kind. Or a lot of times those are automated games, the dumb games that people play on their phones, those automatically post. That probably doesn't mean that they're playing, Candy Crush all day. It probably means that application posts on their behalf all the time. So just some things to be cautionary too when you're looking at that information, to take it with a grain of salt and know that these are just highlights or times in people's lives and not their representation of their whole life. So.
I would like to extend an invitation to all you folks on either side of the desk as an interviewer, and would like some suggestions or some assistance, especially if you're new at it. As an interviewee, if you are somewhat uncomfortable, and we have knowledge of the company that you're going to be interviewing with, we can share that knowledge with you. We can send you to the right resources to learn more. It's important from an interviewee point of view to make sure that you have visited the company's website, you know what their products and services are, you know what the mission of the company is, you're able to get a feel for the culture of the company. You'll be able to see, in some cases, the names and a picture of the managers who are going to perhaps be interviewing you. In other cases, they don't provide that, but there are many that do. So an interviewer likes it when you are prepared with information about them. So make sure you prepare yourself with good information about the company that you're interviewing with or the public agency that you're interviewing with.
Which brings us to the point too, that you are interviewing them as well, right, Laura?
Yes.
She's talked to me a lot about this.
Yes, and even going back to the social media thing, if like I mentioned, posting things that are towards your cause, so it's going to show on your Facebook page which side of the fence you lean towards. And then if someone, and Rich, you talked about this, if there's a company whose culture leans heavily one way or the other, and they go to your website and they judge you for whichever side you're on, which is not the same as theirs, that company is probably not a good fit either. So what you're talking about there is culture and fit. And so when you're coming in as an interviewee to be interviewed, you're also scoping out the company to see if it's even a place you want to be. This is where you're going to spend the majority of the hours of your working life and the people that you're going to be with. And it's not really a decision that should be taken too lightly. And one of the reasons I do the career coaching is because no one ever talked to me about what would be the right fit for me. I went straight into government, and as a very motivated person who is willing to work overtime to do what needs to be done and come up with new and innovative ideas, all the red tape involved in government is not, I spent 10 years there just to find out that I was drowning in red tape. So that's something to consider. You may be desperate to get that paycheck, but if you take the job that's not right for you, you might be actually putting your future off a little bit or end up in a couple of years in a place you didn't want to be. So I think you mentioned, Jessica, the last time we did this little run through was something about always having your sights ahead of you and trying to not just think about what's happening tomorrow, but what's going on, to what you want your future to look like.
Right. Well, and that can go to work-life balance within a company. Sometimes you can get some ideas on their culture from an interview in terms of what's expected in that regard. And then also, location. People hop all over the country for positions, which, if that is conducive to their lifestyle, I think that's awesome. But the fact of the matter is, if I really want to live in Omaha and I'm taking countries all over the world or jobs all over the country, then I'm not happy anywhere, and I wonder why. Because I want to be in Omaha. It has nothing to do with the position or the company. So you really have to know as a job seeker what you're looking for. And knowing that is going to make the interview so much easier too, because I know there's employers that say, well, this person won't enjoy it here because they're from Omaha and they're not going to like it here in this big city. Well, that's a question to ask the candidate, and make sure you're probing to that candidate about the reasons that they're looking and why they're intrigued by that.
There are three basic things. There are three basic things that you can, if you just keep this in mind as an interviewee, to get that discussion started.
Yes.
And that is, ask the employer, what is your opinion of the status of our industry as a whole? Are we, if you happen to be in the geospatial field, you're sitting in the right seat, I can tell you that, because we are one of the top 3 fastest growing industry segments in the world. We are not just mapping companies anymore. Now we're Arby's and Walgreens, and we're insurance companies, and we're banks, and we're everywhere. The other level of questioning is, what makes your company or your public agency stand out among the others, and allow them to brag about their company, allow them to talk about how important their public agency service is. These are not things they have to study for. And then the final level of questioning is, how did you end up sitting in this seat today? Tell me about your career history, your journey to where you are today. That really is a kind of thing that it's informational. It is something that people like to talk about. These are the kinds of things that people talk about at a cocktail party. Well, what you're really trying to do is formalize that a little bit and learn more about the perspective of the industry, the company, the public agency, and the person that you're sitting across the desk from.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're heading toward the end here. Do you have any final comments, either one of you?
I just wanted to make sure to mention that when you come to the interview as the interviewee, when you come, your interview starts when you walk in the door. So you need to be courteous to the people that you see, say hi to the receptionist, be kind, not, hey, I'm here to see so-and-so, and you're just some lady sitting here by the phone. You need to have something to write on. They often, in the interview, will mention things you've never heard of, or don't know the answer to. And if you were writing those down, it lets them know that you're the kind of person that will go look that up later, even whether you do or not. It makes you seem more prepared. Bring copies of your resumes and your references. They may not have up to this point asked for references. They might have any intentions of ever calling any, but it's forward thinking and proactive for you to bring it. And let's see, I just wanted to make sure that we had that out there for being prepared. Yeah. And Rich, how about you?
Real basic. Dress the best that you can. Remember that they will never see you look this good again, because you are probably not, if you are a man, if you're a male and you are interviewing for a technical position that does not require you to see clients or anything like that, they're probably not dressed in suits and ties. But if you are trying to dress as if you are already working there, I think that you're undershooting what the goal is here. Go ahead and wear that jacket, that sport jacket and a tie, because it's easier to remove the jacket, remove or loosen the tie, than it is not to have it. It's just a matter of making sure that you're presenting yourself at your best when you walk in the door.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone coming. We do have our next webinar. We took a poll last month, and it's going to be on social networking for either the job search or for looking for employees, but just in general networking as it pertains to social media. And then everyone that attended today will get emailed a link to this webinar, and you will also have the opportunity to download a resource that we put together for you, just a few links for employers and job seekers on the interviews, interview techniques and tips and tricks and things like that. And I think that's it. Can you think of anything else that we need to cover today?
Well, if you missed this webinar and you want to come, Jessica will be joining me on a similar topic. We'll talk less from the interviewer side and more from the interviewee side.
Yes,
and all three of us welcome your emails and your phone calls if you have something specific you'd like to talk about. So yes, absolutely. Any of the three of us, our door is open, and talk to us.
Good luck in your job search and finding those employees. Have a wonderful afternoon.